Okay, so this is a video of how to install the Airsoft Engenuity KWA Crisp Vector Carbon Fibre loading nozzle. So I've disassembled the gun already, which you push out the 4 body pins, cock the gun, and then you can pull the lower receiver away from the upper. And then you can start to pull out the recoil spring guide and the bolt carrier. So to get the bolt carrier out of the recoil spring guide, you just twist it and pull it out. And then there's 3 pins that you need to take out. There's 2 here and a longer one at the back. So 2 at the front, holding these 2 push-in pieces here, and they come out once you've taken the pins out by a screwdriver down there, and just do that. It can be a bit stiff the first time you do it, and same with that one. Pop them out. And they're basically they act as the nozzle guide when it's assembled. And this other pin I need to knock out. We'll do that, like so. Push that. So you'd end up with that, 2 of them, and I've already taken the small ones out because they're quite tricky, and you'd end up with 2 of those as well. Only got 1 to hand. And then it's a simple case of pull the original nozzle out. We'll pretend this is the original nozzle, but obviously it's the new one. This is the carbon fibre vector version by Airsoft Engenuity, and it's got a couple of main features. One is you can adjust the FPS. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And the other is it's got a ported rear and an O-ring, which gives a much better seal into the bolt carrier than the standard cup design. So I'll show you how you'd assemble this now from scratch. So effectively take all the bits out. There we go. So that's how it'll come when you get it. The rear piece has 2 lugs on it, so obviously locate there. Then you push that in and turn it, and that's how you lock the nozzle together. It might be on yours, if this is just a little bit tight, just gently shave a little bit off there and a little bit off there, but they are checked and generally they fit quite well. But if it's really tight to the point where you can't do it with your fingers and you think you have to use pliers, then that's usually down to these being a little bit too large, or a little bit of swarf on them or something. So a simple, just gently file the edges down ever so slightly. I'm talking 0.1 of a mil, nothing much, and it will go in turn. Okay, so first thing is the nozzle. And you take the rocket valve spring and the rocket valve, which goes in that way, like that. And you should be able to just push that straight down, and it should go right in like that, no problem. That's the first bit. The second bit is you should have from your OEM nozzle the nozzle return spring, and it's got its little hoop on there that the return spring securing pin goes through, which has got a little cut out in the middle, so that will go like that. So that goes into here, and you just grab the pin and just drop it, spring a little bit, push it through, and get the pin through the other side, like so. There you go. That's that. And then just a simple case of grabbing this, putting that in there, twisting, done. Now the FPS adjustment, this is the same for all gas guns actually, is the FPS isn't really determined by the nozzle valve spring. If you stiffen that up, which you might think will give you more FPS, it kind of will do, but what it'll do is it'll mean that the gas pressure isn't sufficient, or the pressure difference, sorry, I should say, isn't sufficient between either side of the valve with such a stiff spring to close it. So you'll just get an enormous vent of gas and one shot at probably quite high FPS, and that'll be it. So what actually dictates it is it's the distance that the rocket valve sits from the closed position, which is sort of like that, to how far back it sits in here. So to adjust the FPS, this is a lot easier than the OEM nozzle. The OEM nozzle is almost impossible to get the rear out without breaking it. Same on the Martin nozzles as well. Martin's unbelievably difficult to get the rear piece out. It's almost like they've assembled it and glued it and don't want you to take it apart. Anyway, so yeah, to adjust the FPS, I'll pop this out, and it's these two lugs on either side here that determine the FPS. So if you shave, say, the width of this screwdriver, which is 1.5 mil maybe, that would get you quite a large increase in FPS. It's surprising. That could probably be around 100 FPS increase from the factory. If you grind it all the way back here, it won't work at all, because you need to be able to get gas pressure behind the rocket valve to close it to enable the blowback. If you completely grind these away, you'll get zero blowback, and the gun won't function. So don't take too much off these. If you do break it or snap it or take too much off, you can buy these separately. So I guess what you could do is lots of ways you can do it. You could have multiple nozzles, or you could have one nozzle, and you could have a couple of different backs, and you just swap the bits over, and you could have one for CQB, one for woodland. I have got quite high FPS out of this, over 400 FPS by grinding these back. So effectively, although why you'd want to do it, you could DMR your vector as well, and then have to do something to the trigger system, which I'm not as familiar with, to try and make it single shot. But yeah, basically, so to do the FPS, grind a little bit off here at a time. I'm talking 0.2, 0.3 of a mil at a time. Good way to do it is a piece of sandpaper and grind it like that, and ensures you get a nice finish on it, or a flat file. Then put it back in, put it back in the gun, test fire it, chrono it, and then take a bit more if you need to. It's quite difficult to put the material back, so don't take too much off. But like I said, if you do, you can buy these extra rear pieces at $4.99 plus postage off eBay. So to reassemble, pretty straightforward. You just shove that back in. You should grease the O-ring lightly with some silicone oil or silicone grease, and that is, it's quite a smooth fit. Just a slight bit of resistance with the O-ring. Get it so that the metal piece is pushed through. Sometimes that can be quite tight if you've never taken it out before, and it might only go part way back, and you'll struggle to get this pin through here. So if you've got a screwdriver like this, which is thin enough to go through, pushing it in will force that to go backwards and seat correctly, and then you just take the pin, the other way around, and just knock that pin into there. Put these in. Don't forget to put these back in, because if you do, you can see how the nozzle can move around quite a bit. That can cause damage to the nozzle if these aren't properly in, because it means it's not aligned with all the hot unit and everything, and it can cause damage, and it won't work basically. So you need to put these back in, and make sure these have got quite loose now because they've been in and out a few times, but they're usually there's like a little bit of a tight fit to go through there, and you sometimes need a little bit of a tap to go in. Same with this one, like that, and then that's it. Put the two little pins back in, don't forget those. Having these loose, it affects the recoil, and they need to be tight. Put that back in, reassemble, and you're good to go. Now, there's one minor issue that you can get with the vectors, where Seems to be some kind of tolerance issue between different vectors. I've had 1 or 2 customers have a few issues, and they are extremely finicky in terms of the bolt has to be absolutely fully forward for the trigger to pull. If it's not, you'll just get a dead man's click. And the solution to it is, well, there's 2 ways of doing it. First of all, on vectors, if it's been used and it's a little bit older, this recoil spring can get a little bit weaker, which is sometimes doesn't help this nozzle seat fully into the hop unit. So some shims at the bottom, just to put a bit of extra tension in, is a good idea. Or if that's not working, and it can be 0.1 or 0.2 of a mil, like the thickness of a piece of paper or a couple of sheets of paper, from this not being fully forward in the housing, and it won't fire. The trigger just won't do anything. So the other alternative is just to get a file and file off. You're talking 0.2, 0.3 of a mil, nothing major at all, a really small amount. It's surprising, you know, it's literally thickness. The thickness of that piece of card is enough to stop the trigger, the trigger not firing. It's really, really quite sensitive and tight tolerance, but that should solve it. Okay, so that's it. That's how you assemble it into the vector bolt. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.